Right, because you're almost like, well, this is going to be uncomfortable because what we
Yeah.
were grown up to think is a model is skinny or that a boss is a male or like, you know what I mean? So we're so accustomed to think these things that we're going above and beyond to like explain why we are that. How did we become that?
Can you tell me your backstory of getting into modeling? And was that ever a thought of like, oh, I'd want to do this? Was that part of the plan?
Yeah, funny. When I was a kid, actually, I would always get like dressed up and take like just iconic shoots in my backyard with my older sister, and I just
I
like
love it.
always loved modeling. But I just, my parents never pushed me in that direction. None of my parents really did that. So like, it was just kind of a thing that I like loved to do. And then as I got older, I got thicker and curvier, and after high school, I'd gained like 20 to 30 pounds, and but I was always athletic and I never had like the stereotypical very thin body anyways to begin with. So I played soccer and sports, and modeling was just never in the cards. And then when I went to college, I went to University of Hawaii and was just on the beach in swimsuits taking photos, and people were like, why are you not modeling? Like, you like clearly know what you're doing. Camera turns on. There's like, and I was just like, I don't know. Like, it's just fun for me. I just did it for Instagram, just like for fun. And then it was more of like my friends, honestly, kind of pushing me, like, you should actually do this. And I was like, you guys are crazy. Like, I'm a size 14. Like, no way. And then I saw Ashley Graham blow up with,
Yeah.
Sports Illustrated on the cover and like all these other plus size models. And I was like, wait, there's a huge market now for this. And then an agent reached out on Instagram, and that's kind of how it all unfolded, was like my last year of college.
Wow.
Then I moved home and I was like, well, it looks like my goal now and dream is to move to LA and do this. But I wanted to like save money first and like served at a restaurant to save money living at home, and then moved here May of 2020 during COVID.
Wow.
Crazy times. Mm-hmm.
Can you define for us what is considered quote unquote plus size in the industry? And is that the term you prefer, or is it curve model? Like, what do you find is the difference?
So interesting because there's not one like concrete answer or like concrete like box. Like, everyone could say, oh, if you're over a size 8, you're plus size. Someone else could be like, oh, absolutely not. If you're over size 16, you're plus size. So it's like there's always different explanations and whatever. But for me, what I learned throughout the industry is that there's like this range of like mid-size that doesn't really get represented. And that's a whole different story. But if you're, usually below a size 2 or 4 below, it's called straight size modeling. And that's like, what we were like born up, growing up and watching and seeing. And then there's like that mid size. And then after size like 10 to like 14 or 8 to 14 is more like curve. And then after 14, 16 is plus, is kind of how I learned it to be. So I'm like kind of at that cusp. Whatever someone wants to call me is what they're going to call me. I would say I'm more curve than plus size, but also people will look at me and be like, no, you're a plus size model. Like, so I don't know, just same, but different kind of thing,
Do you find
but
that plus size has like a certain negative connotation to it?
what's funny is when I first got into the industry, I didn't like it. Like, I didn't want to be called
Mm-hmm.
plus size. And I think that's what we were like so ingrained in our heads, that like
Right. It's very fat
plus
phobic.
size was,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And that's just kind of what I was like, we were all just grown up in society. So yeah, at first I thought maybe it was insulting. And now I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
give a shit. Like, you know what I mean? Why is that even insulting? It does literally not matter. Like, so yeah, I'm not insulted by it. I think there is still a negative connotation to it because it's also like, you don't say straight size models. Like, people don't say that. They just say a model and then plus size model. So why are you giving me an extra name and not just like model? And that's what I've had a hard time, because I've even noticed myself, I'm always saying on Instagram, curve model, TikTok, hashtag curve model. And I'm like, I'm actually having a hard time breaking out of that, because my friend sat me down and was like, dude, enough with like the whole curve thing. Like, you're a model. Like, just say you're a model. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I guess I could. But
Mm.
you know what I mean? But I'm always and when I meet someone at a bar, like I'm talking to a guy, oh, what do you do? I'm a curve model. Like, I can never just say I'm a model, because immediately they're like, oh, are you? And look at me up and down. And I'm like, well, there's curve. Okay. Like, or there's plus size.
Right. It
So
requires you
it's
to
really
like
interesting.
instantly apologize for something you don't feel. It's like when people go, like entrepreneur, and then they go, "Oh, you're a female entrepreneur." And I'm like, "No, it's the same thing with girl boss, right? It's like, I'm a boss, or you're
Wait,
a girl boss,
literally.
right?"
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. Well, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it's like you can't even, you have to justify like what you do or who you are with like, yeah, you're just trying to justify something. Like, why can't you just say I'm a freaking boss, I'm a leader, or I'm this, I'm a
Right.
model. It always has to be like an underlying like explanation. It's like annoying.
Well, and for curve model in particular, it's almost could it almost feels like an apology for who you are, right? It's almost like a justification, especially in that example of like going
Mm-hmm.
out on a date. It's like model, oh really, like, and then looks you up and down. It's like, oh well, I'm a curve model, right? That's like a justification. And also, what other industry, right, do you have to tack on how you physically appear in order to be taken seriously? It's like
No,
it's a
literally.
justification plus like almost like an apology or like a descriptor that you don't even need.
Right, because you're almost like, well, this is going to be uncomfortable because what we were
Yeah.
grown up to think is a model is skinny or that a boss is a male or like, you know what I mean? So we're so accustomed to think these things that we're going above and beyond to like explain why we are that. How did we become that? And it's weird. Like even like engineers, like I've seen like hashtag female engineer and, woman in real estate. I'm like, you're a realtor. Like, or like, like we always have to add the gender. It's like, wait, what? Like, it's
Yeah.
annoying.
And I get it from a marketing standpoint, right? Because you're trying to help other potential people find someone that they either, feel more comfortable with. Like for me, it's very much
Right.
like, yes, I'm an entrepreneur regardless of my gender. However, I know that for many women, hearing about money from another woman is going to make the experience better or more inclusive or whatever
Mm-hmm.
that looks like. But yes, on the point of like, why are we immediately justifying or bringing in gender or bringing in size to, yeah, immediately like asterisks ourself.
A
It's like,
hundred
oh,
percent.
entrepreneur, but female entrepreneur. Yeah.
Right, right. But I do think that is a good point because especially with like hashtags and whatever, it's like it's helpful because then people can, find you in other ways or if they're trying to search for like, size 14 clothing, like, it's like it helps when you have that, but sometimes it's like why do I even have to say it?
Right. Well, and that brings us back to inclusivity, right? Because if I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at clothes to figure out how I should dress, if I just type in model, I'm probably getting a bunch of stuff that A will not fit me, B will not look good on me, versus if I type in mid-size
Mm-hmm.
model, right, or curve model, I'm more likely to find, of course, content from other people who have a similar body type to me. So all of this is
Totally.
very cyclical, right? So yeah, we can say like, oh, why do we have to put curve in front of it? And I agree, as an industry, like that makes no sense, right? But it's
Mm-hmm.
also like, if you're trying to create a community around these sorts of things, it almost does there's an additive thing that happens when you do put the asterisks on it. Because yeah, I know if I'm searching, I don't know, if I'm searching like recipes and I type in vegan recipes, right, it's going to be more specific to what I actually want or the content I actually
Totally.
want. And this is an algorithm problem too, but it's really interesting.
Right, right. Yeah, it's more of like a niche. And I think it's interesting you say that because
Yeah.
I have to give credit to you because I was just thinking the other day because I've always found like financial literacy so interesting and I've always wanted to study and learn more, but I was learning all from men and they all had
Yeah.
such different, sorry to kind of sway this conversation now, but they all had such
No.
different feedback and advice. And then it's so cool that you are like the financial feminist because now I know I'm going to go to you to get such a different array of like insight and just it's and knowledge that like a man, I don't know. So like in this regard, it is nice to have like a female entrepreneur and like a financial
Right.
feminist because it's like we don't get that all the time in this, especially in that industry. So you definitely do stand out in that way because I'm like running to your podcast to like learn as much as I can. Like when I just feel like I've been getting so much different, advice from men.
I appreciate that. Well, I feel the same about you. It's the same sort of thing of like, it's the whole representation matters thing, right? Is it's like,
Mm-hmm.
for me, I've only started just coming to terms with, my body and with my curves and with all of these things. And of course, looking at you out here
Mm-hmm.
fucking killing it, I'm like, yeah, great. Let's go.
Right.
Let's go.
Right.
So I feel the exact same way. Yeah.
I
So
love
maybe
that.
yeah, it's interesting. And maybe it's more about, if you're calling yourself that, versus somebody else calling you that, like that, I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to figure out like what the actual distinction is between when it feels like like you're niching in an important way or in a helpful way versus like when you feel
Mm-hmm.
like this some bullshit, you know what I'm talking about? I don't know
That's so
I don't know what it
true.
is.
Yeah, because if you say it yourself, it's more like, yeah, I can call myself a financial feminist or a female entrepreneur. But the second they're like, this is Tori, she's, a female entrepreneur, you're
Right.
like, bitch, I'm an entrepreneur. Let's get to the point.
Right.
Like,
Right.
you
Or like,
know,
on this hypothetical date where you're like, I'm a model. And it was like, you sure about that? And you're like, oh, curve model, right? Because you're having to justify
right.
it to him. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I was on a date and they're like, yeah, she's a plus size model, I'd be like, bro, just say I'm a model and
Fuck
an
off.
influencer
Yeah.
or whatever. Like, fuck off. Like,
Yeah.
keep it short and sweet.
Totally.
Goddamn.
Yeah. Yeah.